The air was thick with dust and heat. The Sweetwater River shimmered in the distance, its slow current glinting like melted glass. Beside the bank,
What is it? You're
a
scaring
wooden
me.
cross
No
stood
time.
crooked,
We have to go.
and tied to it was a young woman. Her wrists were bound behind the post, her body trembling from exhaustion. Her clothes were torn, stained with dirt and sweat, clinging to her like the last thing the world hadn't taken away. A raven screeched above, and then silence. Even the river seemed to hold its breath. Her head hung low, her dark hair sticking to her face, her breath coming in shallow gasps. When she tried to move, the ropes dug deeper into her wrists, drawing another weak cry from her throat. Far across the field, the faint clop of hooves echoed closer. Elias McCrae, a rancher past 60, rode along the trail, scanning the riverbanks for lost cattle. When he saw the cross, he thought it was a broken signpost or an old warning marker. Then the figure on it moved. He slowed his horse. The wind carried a voice, barely more than a whisper. "Take it off, please." Elias froze. That voice wasn't a ghost or a memory. He dismounted, boots crunching over dry grass, and walked toward the cross. As he drew closer, the sight cut straight through him. The woman's skin was pale, her lips cracked, her breathing shallow. Her wrists were swollen and streaked with dried blood. "Easy now," he said, his tone low and steady, the way he talked to spooked horses. She blinked, her eyes glassy with pain. It hurts," she whispered. "Where?" he asked. She winced, her hand twitching behind her. "My side, down there, it burns." Elias knelt, scanning her waist where the torn fabric was stained darker than the rest. He could see blood seeping through the cloth. Not much, but enough to know she was hurt. He reached for his canteen and poured water gently over the spot. Then he tipped the canteen to her lips. She drank like a calf that had never seen a trough, lips cracked white. She hissed through her teeth, flinching, but didn't pull away. "It's all right," he murmured. "Just stay still." Once he was sure the wound wasn't deep, he stood and cut through the ropes with his knife. Her knees gave out, and he caught her before she hit the ground. She was light, almost weightless, like someone who hadn't eaten in days. He wrapped his coat around her shoulders, felt her trembling through the fabric. When he lifted her on to his horse, she looked up at him through half-closed eyes. "They said I cursed their land," she whispered. Elias turned toward the river. The sun was setting, the water red as rust. Behind them, the cross still stood like a monument to madness. As his horse started up the trail, Elias glanced back one last time and muttered, "What kind of people would do this? And what makes them so afraid of her?" By the time Elias got her back to the ranch, the sun had already dipped behind the red hills. He carried her inside the old barn first, laid her down on a pile of hay, and let her drink slow sips of water. For a while, she just stared at the roof beams like she didn't know where she was. Then, when the crickets started up, she finally spoke. "They said I made the water sick." Her voice cracked when she said it. She said they tied her there since yesterday morning, long enough for the sun to burn and the fear to stick. Elias frowned. "The water," she nodded, eyes fixed on the lantern flame. "There had been talk for weeks," she said, "about cattle dying near the river. Some blamed the dry season, some blamed the new mining camp upriver, but a few decided it had to be her, a stranger. A woman with a foreign accent who gathered herbs by the water and carried little silver charms in a pouch. Milagros," she whispered. "Blessings, not curses. My mother made them." Elias leaned on a post, chewing the inside of his cheek. He'd seen this kind of thing before. Fear had a way of turning good people mean when crops failed and bellies went empty. He'd seen men shoot at clouds just to have someone to blame for drought. Now it looked like the same madness had found its way to Sweetwater. "Who tied you up?" he asked. She hesitated. "Men from the town. Some I knew. One was the storekeeper's son. Another wore a preacher's hat." Her words trembled, not from weakness, but from disbelief. "They said the river wouldn't run clear again until I was washed clean by the cross." Elias exhaled slowly, rubbing his jaw. "That's not religion," he said. "That's fear in a borrowed robe." He gave her some bread and soup, then let her rest by the fire outside. The coyotes started calling across the valley, and the smell of sage drifted in through the cracks. Elias stepped onto the porch, staring at the stars, thinking about the men she named. He knew most of them. He'd traded with them, prayed beside them, drunk whiskey with two of them. It didn't sit right in his gut. Maybe the land was cursed, but not by her, by the people too scared to face their own mistakes. Inside, the girl murmured something in her sleep, half English, half Spanish.
We need to
He
leave
caught
now,
only one
before
word.
it's too late. They're
Forgive.
getting closer, we have to!
He pulled the blanket higher over her shoulders and sat beside the fire till dawn. For the first time in months, he didn't think about his wife's grave. He thought about that cross by the river and the men who built it. Somewhere between the crackle of the fire and the cry of a night owl, a thought hit him hard. If those men found out she was still alive, would they come looking for her again? When morning came, Sweetwater Valley was wrapped in a thin fog. Elias sat by the stove, stirring the fire, while the woman still slept. He had found out her name during the night. May. Just May. No last name, no story she cared to share yet. Sometimes silence told more truth than words. When she woke, she tried to stand, but her legs buckled. Elias caught her before she fell again. You need rest, not pride, he said with a half grin. I've had enough rest for a lifetime, she muttered. That stubborn spark in her eyes reminded him of his wife. He didn't say it out loud, but it stung a little. Later that day, he hitched up the wagon to go fetch supplies from town. May leaned against the wall, dragging her feet toward the gate. Voice rough as gravel. I can't stay. They'll burn you too. I can't stay here, she said. They'll come looking. Elias fixed her with a steady look. Let them. This ranch has got room for one more ghost. That made her smile, just a little, but word travels fast in small towns. By noon, whispers had already reached the store in South Pass City. The old rancher had brought home the river witch. Some called him crazy. Some said he'd been lonely too long. By sunset, even the preacher, Josiah Webb, rode up to the ranch to see for himself. He was a thin man with sharp eyes and a voice that carried. He didn't accuse, just ask questions. How did she come to your place, Elias? Same way most of us end up where we don't belong, Elias replied. By accident. The preacher studied May for a moment, then nodded slowly. Fear runs quicker than reason around here, he said. You both should be careful. That night, they ate together by the fire. Elias told her stories about his wife, about how they built the ranch from nothing. May listened, quiet, mending an old shirt she found in a chest. It was the first time laughter broke the silence in that house since the funeral. Outside, the coyotes were back, calling to each other in the dark. Elias leaned back in his chair and looked at her across the firelight. He wasn't sure if he was saving her or if she was saving him. Either way, something in that quiet felt right. But far across the valley, another light flickered. Someone had lit a torch on the trail to Sweetwater again. The men who tied her up weren't done yet. Before we see what happens next, if you've been listening this far, take a breath, pour yourself a cup of tea, lean back, and tell me, what time is it where you are, and where are you listening from? And if you want to keep walking this dusty road with us, go ahead and tap that subscribe button. It helps more than you think. That night, the wind picked up again, hot and restless. The smell of rain and dust mixed together, the kind that warns you something's coming. Elias sat on the porch, a lantern beside him, shotgun across his knees. May was inside, pacing like a caged bird. She'd been quiet all evening, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. They won't let it go, she said finally. Elias didn't look at her. I know, he replied. He'd heard horses in the distance for the past hour. Voices carried on the wind. Men, not coyotes. By the time he stood up, the glow of torches was already visible through the sagebrush. 6, maybe 7 riders. All from the town. They stopped just outside the fence, the light from their torches flickering over their faces. One called out, McCrae, we don't want trouble, but she don't belong here. Let us take her, and we'll leave you in peace. Elias leaned on the porch rail, calm but steady. This is my land, he said, and she's under my roof. That's all you need to know. The leader snorted. You think you can hide her forever? You'll bring the same curse down on yourself. May stepped outside then, clutching a small bundle of herbs. This is what killed your cattle, she said, her voice trembling but clear. Not me. Poison weed. Look at it. She tossed the bundle down where the torchlight caught the pale flowers. For a second, no one spoke. But the silence didn't last. One of the men lifted his torch higher. Lies,
I
he
came
said.
back.
She's got the devil's mark.
Don't be. I'm here
Elias
now.
stepped forward,
glad.
his shadow stretching across the yard. Put that fire down, he said quietly. You're one spark away from a mistake you can't pray your way out of. Then, through the thick of it, came another sound. Hoofbeats. Slow and steady, the men turned to see Reverend Josiah Webb riding through the gate, rain dripping from his hat. Enough, he said. This in his hands now. The preacher slid from his horse, eyes hard as stone. As he raised his hand, thunder cracked so loud it shook the corral fence. Folks still remembered the day he shot a rattlesnake off the church wall with the old Colt he still wore under his black coat. One horse reared, knocking its rider into the mud. That broke the spell. I was there when the cattle were buried. I saw the roots of that weed myself. You'll not hang another soul tonight. The men shifted, uncertain. Some crossed themselves, others just stared at the mud like they finally saw their own shame. No one wanted to argue with the preacher in front of God and thunder. One by one, they backed away, muttering into the wind. Torches dropped, horses turned, and just like that, they were gone. Next Sunday, Reverend Webb held up the same weed in church. No new cows died, and 2 sick ones stood by evening. When the yard went dark again, May sank to her knees. Elias reached down, helped her up, and for the first time, she didn't pull away. Reverend Webb tipped his hat. Keep her safe, Elias. Folks forget fast, but not enough. Elias looked toward the horizon where lightning still danced over the desert. They'll come again, won't they? He asked. The preacher sighed. Maybe not the same men, but fear always finds a new face. Outside, thunder rolled low across the valley, and inside that little house, 2 people sat in silence, wondering which face fear would wear next. The rain lasted through the night. By morning, the valley smelled of wet sage and fresh earth. Elias stepped outside, boots sinking into the soft ground. The world washed clean for a moment. Inside, May was still asleep by the fire, her hands curled beneath her chin like a child. For the first time since his wife passed, the house didn't feel empty. The preacher had ridden out before dawn, leaving behind a quiet promise to check on them again. The men from town didn't return. Fear had burned itself out, at least for now. Elias fixed coffee, the strong kind that bites your tongue, and sat watching the smoke curl toward the rafters. He had lived his whole life by a few simple rules. Work hard, keep your land, trust no one too easily. But this girl had bent every one of them. When she woke, she thanked him again, voice still soft but steady. He handed her a bowl of oatmeal and said, half joking, you're going to have to start earning your keep around here. She smiled, a real one this time, and that was the beginning. Days turned into weeks. May helped mend fences, fed the horses, and planted herbs by the well. Elias taught her how to read the weather, how to tell good cattle from bad. At night, they shared stories by the fire. Not because they had to, but because the silence didn't hurt anymore. Sometimes he caught himself talking to her the way he once did to his own daughter before she passed years ago. And sometimes May looked at him with the quiet care of someone who finally found a place she didn't have to run from. One morning, a letter arrived from Reverend Webb. It wasn't much, just a few lines written in his careful hand. He had spoken to the county clerk in Lander. And there was a way to make things right, on paper, too. Guardianship, he called it. Legal words that meant something simple, family, when they rode into town that week. Elias signed his name with a steady hand. She signed hers beneath it. 26, she whispered, pen shaking. No law says I need a father, but some doors open faster when the paper says family. No blood, no law could make them father and daughter. But life could. By the time they rode home, the valley was gold with evening light. The river moved slow and calm again. Elias stopped by the ridge and looked out across the water. Funny thing, he said. The land still looks the same, but I sure don't feel like the same man. May smiled, the wind tossing her hair. First time I've seen a man clean his heart clearer than the river. Now, I don't know about you, but stories like this always make me wonder. How far would you go to stand up for someone the world turned its back on? Would you have done what Elias did? If this story gave you something to think about, maybe a little warmth, maybe a reminder of what kindness can still do, give it a like. And if you want to hear more stories from the Old West that still have something to say to us today, hit that subscribe button, then pour yourself another cup of tea. Sit back and tell me, what time is it where you are, and where are you listening from?